Hi, this is John Delancey, and you are listening to the Geekcast Radio Network.
Hello and welcome to episode 206 of the Cinema Geeks. I am one of your Cinema Geeks Optimus Solo, and joining me once again today is the comic concierge. Dan, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Doing good, doing good. We are back into our next film in the Alfred Hitchcock series. So last time you heard us talk about the 39 Steps, and today we're going to go to 1946's Notorious, an American spy film noir. Starring Cary Grant, Ingrid Bergman, and Claude Rains as the three main folks. Dan, what was your experience with this one before this record?
I have never seen it before. This was the first time watch for me, so I was interested in going into this one.
Yeah, it was a first time watch for me as well, as will majority of these films, which is one of the reasons why we're doing it, to check off a few blind spots for me and a couple for you as well. So this one is 1946, so right after World War II, basically, like on the heels of it, I guess you could say. And this one is, like I said, a spy film noir. We have a U.S. government agent who is being played by Cary Grant, enlisting the help of Ingrid Bergman, who is the daughter of a German war criminal, as we see in like the opening sequence. And he's enlisting her to help infiltrate circles of executives in Rio de Janeiro after World War II. So, what was your initial take on Notorious?
Because after I watched this, I looked at some of the overall reviews of the time. Obviously it's known going into this, it's known to be well regarded and things like that. But people at the time called it it was Alfred Hitchcock growing up, and I was wondering what they meant by that. But I guess it kind of makes sense because almost from afar, if I were to watch this without knowing which Hitchcock, I don't know if I would have realized that, because it does. With him, you're so used to the suspense being such the focal point. He tends to use the camera a lot of movement, and it wasn't there. But I ended up generally though really liking this film a good amount. It was not expecting it to be as much of a not straight romance, but romance is the center of this movie. But
Right.
that is where the conflict is. That is what it's. That's probably first and foremost. It's a romance film, almost like a love triangle, but that's a love triangle that's been manufactured because of this, potential plot to not overtake the government, but this plot to try to spy on the Nazis. So it's interesting in that realm. But I was a bit taken back by how much this was a love story first. But really, I think what made it work was Cary Grant and Ingrid Bergman, and their performances. You forget, we think movie star today, and I don't know. There's a loss. There's a not as they just feel like normal people now. I guess rewatching this, Cary Grant felt like a different type of person. He's oh, that is a movie star. That is a movie star with a capital M. He just felt like he commanded the screen. He was so captivating. Same thing with Ingrid Bergman, who probably is the person making the movie work. But I ended up really enjoying it. How about yourself?
Yeah, this one really had, I had nothing about it. I didn't look up what the plot was or what the story was going to be about or anything like that going into this. And I had obviously not seen it before. So went in with complete, no expectations, no anything. And it really had me from the beginning. Like, maybe not the courtroom scene, but that next sequence where they're showing Cary Grant from behind, and all you can see is his head and hair from behind, and you're not quite sure
Mm-hmm.
who this character is or what they're all about. Like, that sequence, like, hooked me immediately, and I was there for the rest of the film, just waiting to see how it went next. Cary Grant, I haven't seen all of his films, but I know that I've seen The Philadelphia Story, I've seen Arsenic and Old Lace, I've seen a few of his films, and he's always been one of my favorite from this era. maybe it was because I was in Arsenic and Old Lace in high school, so like I remember watching this as a teenager or young teenager, and just like being captivated by how Cary Grant was doing things. And you're right, like he is a movie star. Like I feel like there was probably a whole generation of folks that grew up wanting to be Cary Grant. Like he just he just controls the stage, he controls the room, and he just has a nice way about him that's like like you said, a movie star with a capital M, but somehow relatable at the same time. Like he's playing like a movie star and like the common man, it seems like in a lot of these ways. Like maybe not the common man, but he has like that essence where it's like I can picture this being like whatever, your uncle, or like I don't know, like it's just like it was a weird dichotomy of someone that like is clearly on another plane, but like that I find not not easy to follow and like not really relate to. That's the wrong term, but just kind of like have that feeling of comfort around him, I guess. He has a way
Yeah.
of comforting you into like whatever he's doing. I
You,
think go ahead.
he was even like you saw a little bit of vulnerability. Not like he obviously had this front because he's in love with this woman who's now basically having to play this part and be in this relationship that she's pretending to be in order to work for the government. And like you see how like it makes how angry it makes him, and like how he like takes it out on her, like and like thinking that like it's all her fault. But then seeing him like kind of come to terms with that, which something I wasn't necessarily expecting, because like he actually when he owns up to it, like there was a level of vulnerability there, despite him being kind of this like no nonsense, like I I'm the one that has the command of everything that's happening when and where, but at times you saw that was really just a facade, even if it wasn't obvious at first sight.
Yeah, and it's interesting how they do that too, because they really introduce him as like cooler than the other side of the pillow type, like Rico Suave, like completely in command, and they almost deconstruct that throughout the rest of the movie. As far as like showing that vulnerability or showing like the different times where he doesn't have the one up on everybody. So I thought that was interesting, and then I think you nailed it too. Like Ingrid Bergman is fantastic. And am like Casablanca is one of my favorite films of all time, and the fact that we get two people from there with Ingrid Bergman and Claude Rains was like I don't know, that that didn't hurt. I'll just say that much, as far as my experience with it. Um, what did you think of the whole kind of from a story standpoint, like the espionage, the putting her undercover, the kind of the twists and turns of how that worked? Did the story work for you, or was it more about the performances and like the other parts of making a film?
I think it was more about the performances because I feel like even with the story, the I think they kept us at arm's length a lot, and I think they even didn't. There's a lot of details that like, kind of just come up, like even when they get to Rio de Janeiro, and I'm like, I don't really know why they're there, and then I realized they hadn't really go over it yet. Like I'm like, even those characters are like, we don't even know what the mission is yet. So it was like, oh okay, like they know it. I think if it, the script itself, I think it what I liked about it is how like it didn't waste time, but within that, like there's a lot of stuff it doesn't really even seem that interested in exploring. What is she really after? The secrets. It's kind of like it's like, about like the uranium or whatever. But I felt like that was probably the least interesting part. It was the avenue to get us to this conflict, or that was exciting. But the plot itself, like I think with a lot of noir films, it's a bit convoluted, and how they get there. It's like does this really make sense? The more you think about it, but I think it did enough in order to make the movie work.
I'm also trying to like, as I was thinking about this one in my head, I'm trying to like put myself into the mind of someone in 1946 watching this, which is impossible,
Yeah,
because we've seen so many movies during our lifetime that came out after this, and I'm trying to like picture or think about like how would they have the audiences of that time responded. I know you said you read some reviews, but those are more from critics, but just like from a just a general audience of like from something that they maybe haven't seen a thousand times, like how they kind of navigated this and responded to this. Because I think it does something that I do like in spy films or suspense films or whatever, even in some TV series. I appreciate when they do this. was one of the reasons why I was like a big MacGyver fan growing up. But when you see your hero or you see your like main character get in a position and you're genuinely questioning like, okay, how do they actually get out of this? Like I
Yeah.
like that aspect of it because sometimes in movies we see stuff and we're like, well, okay, it's not very suspenseful of how they're going to get out of a situation. Like you can see the writing on the wall, or you can like predict what's going to happen, or it's just not that convoluted. But I appreciate when there's a time in a film where it's like, wait a second, like how are they going to write themselves out of this little thing? And I felt that that happened at least once, if not a couple times in this one, where I was like, and it also helps that it's dealing with somebody that's undercover because that adds to that. Like, how are they going to get out of this
Yeah.
without being figured out or without being caught? I mean, there's one point where Cary Grant goes into a room like so not caring, like so not concerned, I guess, about what was going to happen that I was like, ooh, that was like really not well thought out by you. Like,
Yeah.
how are you gonna navigate this now? And of course they do because it's a movie and whatever, but like I appreciate that aspect of some of the plot things. And then and I'll let you get back in here, but I think I agree with you too on the pacing. And it's interesting because we just came from 39 Steps, and one of the things that we both agreed on with 39 Steps was that the pacing was very quick. Like there wasn't wasted scenes, there wasn't wasted moments. You felt like everything was interesting, like all the side characters were interesting. So it really flowed well and it was like a breeze to watch through. And I feel like this had some aspects of that as well. What did you think?
Yeah, because I was thinking about that too, because it's like, this obviously it hinges upon the idea of like these people could fall in love immediately, and I think either you buy that, or you don't. I thought the performances made it seem believable, but like you said, I do think it like I mentioned, it didn't waste time. Like for example, she ends up getting married, and do we get a scene of the wedding or the honeymoon or anything like that? It's like, nope, it happened. It happened. We talked about it. That's not. We don't need to dwell on it. And that's the thing. It didn't dwell on a lot of things. I think it. I feel like not to be like, oh, movies today, but I do feel like movies today we would have gotten like a 20-minute sequence of the wedding, and like they'd have to like show us everything. And here I did like the appreciate it that they didn't do that. They just, they let it go as it was, and like that you
Um,
knew you didn't need that information. You were able to understand what happened. We don't need that sequence. We are just going to skip over it and get into, what the point is. And also thought, as you mentioned, like that room sequence or like the whole idea of like, are we going to get out of this one? But it also like it being Hitchcock, using visuals to help clue in like the tension of something. Like there's
mhm,
a scene where they're trying to go down to the cellar, and there's no ticking time bomb, but there is because of the wine or the whatever they were drinking.
mhm.
Like if they ran out of that, then potentially people are going downstairs and they could catch them. So they just kept going back to that. Like they utilizing that as just a quick and easy visual to understand about like, okay, like this is something you have to worry about. Similarly, you get this running motif of the key. Like this key is utilized a lot. It's a big plot
Mhm.
point, and it does a great job of making you understand what it's there for, what its impact, and how it really moves the plot along. So those those key, no pun intended, but there was a lot of visual representation of really important pieces of the plot, of understanding like decisions that were being made and how people were able to figure things out. I thought that made it, like you talked about, how would people respond to it. I think it gave them a lot of things to look at or understand regarding why characters were thinking the way they were thinking or doing what they were doing.
Yeah, and interesting you bring up that key. I read something that Cary Grant like kept that key after the movie for a while, and had it as like a little good luck charm, and that he eventually gifted it to Ingrid Bergman later on. I don't know the details of that, but also I wonder too. Now I know there was long movies back in the day, but I also wonder like at times if some of this stuff didn't have a pace because of budgetary constraints and like a concern for how much film they were using. I don't know, but like this has a runtime of 101 minutes, so, it's kind of in a decent spot there. But yeah, or if we're gonna notice that as we pay attention as we go through the rest of this Hitchcock, if it's more of a Hitchcock thing where he just doesn't like to waste screen time on stuff that he doesn't dictate as important or something that he can't get through with like a line of dialogue or two instead of a like you said, like a 15-20 minute scene that's going to explain it for us. And so far, I've appreciated that. I've liked the pacing of both of these first two films for sure. What did you think? As far as the way, because I read something afterwards, and I guess it hadn't clicked with me at first, because it seems like it is somewhat of a movie that could lend itself to, like, violence is maybe too strong of a word, but we're dealing with undercover, we're dealing with spies, we're dealing with Nazi infiltrating a Nazi organization. We're there, we do have a situation where we can infer that someone's going to die and things of that nature. But I guess there's not like a single moment on this film that depicts an actual act of violence, outside of maybe like a slap across the face or something. And I thought
Yeah.
that was somewhat interesting how Hitchcock is able to do that without letting you know he's doing that. Like, this is one of the, like, a movie that could come out like later on and never get attacked by like the neighborhood watch group of moms censoring films or whatever it was, like in the 80s and stuff like that. Like, I feel like it would have just slid right past there. But like, it's interesting that they don't choose to do anything. You know, I don't know if that would exist today, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like, they would feel the need to show us something more drastic, and I appreciate that they didn't have to do that, but they still got across all of the feelings of that, like, creating that environment.
Yeah. Think that they would clue us into it, like they would, like, or uh, able to establish that stakes by, because you had this one character who has a little bit of a freak out, which wasn't even that big of a freak out, but you
That
see
was the
him
only
react.
part of the film that I was confused about. I
Yeah.
was at
Like,
first. I mean, I get that explains it, but at first I'm like, "What is going on, and why is this guy freaking out, and why is everybody mad at him?"
yeah. So, you have this character who's going to dinner and he has a reaction to a bottle of wine. It seems kind of odd and it causes other people to react the same way and, like, to his reaction. And then we don't see that character and it's pretty, directly related that he's no longer with us. But I think that was important to establish, like, yeah, the death is on the line here. Because if you even were to just, even in a group among friends per se, because everyone there was pretty much, it wasn't like it was open to the public, but if you were to step out of line, there's a good chance that you're not making it, which made the ending, I think, all that more impactful. Because, like you said, there's nobody getting stabbed in the back. There's no, psycho scene that the people are obviously aware of. The biggest moment of tension in this is people walking downstairs and other people walking out of a room. But it still was very intense because I was like, because this is Hitchcock, so I was like, maybe they won't make it. Like, maybe, like, because
Right.
it could be, I could see him giving us some sort of dark ending or something like that. Because
Yeah.
obviously there was the certain regulations and things that he had to go by. But I was curious. But yeah, you're right. There was not a lot. It was a thriller that was all about atmosphere and allowing you to put the pieces together, which helped, like I said, with all those visual cues that were given. So that certainly, and I thought the twists and turns here too, like the cat and mouse game that was being played, how they knew, and like how she was, like, found out, and like how, but even though she was found out, there was certain things that, like, they couldn't really allow the other Germans to know that she was found out, because it would then endanger them as well. I thought it was, like, in a way of, it made sense, like, in how all these pieces went together.
Yeah.
So
I was curious what you thought of the mother character. So, basically, we have Ingrid Bergman's character, Alicia, who is staying with Alexander Sebastian is the character's name, the character played by Claude Rains, and in this house, and he has some Nazi friends, doctors or conspirators or different things like that, and then he has his mom is there as well, and she plays a very slight role at first, and kind of gets more involved as it is, but what did you think of, like, her as a character and kinda how they used her in the plot and different things like that? Or was it a character you enjoyed, or kinda give me your take on her?
yeah, I think you knew right away that she was going to be the one that caused trouble in a way, because, like, she saw through it, like, the mother's intuition or whatever. Like, she's like, yeah, this person's gonna marry my son right away. Like, that doesn't seem, like, everything. Like, I thought she was that classic foil. where she was going to be that influence where you're just like, okay. I actually thought she was going to play a bigger role
Hmm.
in like finding her out. Like she'd be the one that actually like catches her or something like that. But but her presence there again, talking about tension, because you always were wondering like where's she at, because she's clearly not trusting the situation. She's looking for a reason. But I thought her role was the actress was great, and I thought her role was important.
And I did read somewhere that that's something that we'll have to keep an eye on as we kind of move our way through. I don't know if we're hitting all the films that do this, but there was um, some reading that I did that said that Hitchcock spent some time with like the mother son relationship in a few of his films, and this is the first time we've seen it because we obviously didn't really see that in 39 Steps. So it'd be interesting to see if we see it pop up in any of the other films and kind of how it's portrayed and things of that nature. So what other things did you find about this film that stood out to you, or any other commentary on things you liked or didn't like?
No, I just had me also thinking, because you talked about the reaction of the time, and you're thinking like this is 1946. We're like what year or so? That
Right.
felt like just thinking when this was happening. I don't think when this was shooting World War II was happening, but it was. I just makes me think about like it gets into, although it's about World War II, it even ties into a little bit of the Cold War, because you have uranium. This material is the center of it, which apparently also caused them to be like I think there's a thing about how the Alfred Hitchcock said they were like being watched by the FBI since it was such a
Yeah.
hotbed issue. Um, but I think it also it got into the time back before before World War II, when there was that like weird relationship with the United States and Germany, where like we weren't at war, but we were like kind of on the there were some people in the United States that were very the German American bond and things like that. I think it was interesting how it tied into that odd relationship where like these are two countries that were clearly like at odds, but they had to play nice, and how that tied into this, because you obviously like they know that there are certain federal agents that are there, but they can't do anything about it, and they kind of have to just try to play this crazy game. I don't I find that really interesting, and what like just thinking of its place in history, I find kind of fascinating. Just trying to think of the time and when this came out, and like how it played with people at the
Yeah.
time, like what their reaction may have been.
Yeah, it says it was shot in late 1945. And if we're talking late 1945, I think the atomic bomb was dropped in the fall of 1945. So it's being shot right
Yeah,
after that, which is kind of crazy. And yeah, I read the same thing about the FBI having him under surveillance for a number of months afterwards. He did consult a Nobel Prize winner to uh, find out some answers about like what he could put in this film. And I guess like the only thing that he would tell him was that it involved uranium. So that's why we get that as a thing here. What did you think about the final, I guess, scene or the final shot and kind of how it all resolves itself?
I liked that because I think again it's going back to that relationship with Germany and America, and how you basically have this guy who is he's kind of having to basically the life he's led is coming back to haunt him, because he's a Nazi, and now he because of everything he was doing, now the people that he was working with are turning on him because they don't trust him. I thought it was a good, and like he wasn't even, I would say, like an evil person. He wasn't like, he seemed like just from afar maybe a generally nice guy per se. Like he wasn't like, even though he was a Nazi, the way they approached the character, which is weird to say, I know, but like he wasn't like
He
the
didn't
characters.
a ruthless like like crazed lunatic. He didn't come across that
Yeah,
way. You're right.
yeah, he wasn't like the characters from like Bridge of the Lost Ark. So,
Right.
but at the same time, he was doing some really bad and obviously um, evil things,
Right.
and including he was willingly poisoning her as well. So it's not, but I thought it was a good way of having, it was it was a very satisfying conclusion, because he got his cut on Muppets per se, but it just showed that old saying, um, sleep with dog, rise with fleas. It's like one of those things where like the crowd he was around, is now going to be leading to his demise because of the decisions that he made.
Right.
It just felt rather fitting.
And it was also, I think, one of the most powerful shutting of a car door that I've seen
Yes.
in film history. It was like, oh, that has a lot of meaning behind it.
Yeah.
Um, so
And he had to
yeah,
reach over too. It didn't even have the automatic locks. He had to like do the reach, which is make it much harder than pushing the
right.
button. So
Yeah, there's no way getting in there. So yeah, I really liked this one. It obviously is well received overall. I mean, I think it has like a, I don't know, a 96 or 98% or something like that on Rotten Tomatoes. It's fairly high. And you said you read some of the reviews of that time. Is this something that you feel like over time has gotten more and more positive as more time has passed?
no, it was highly regarded then. I think it like people I don't think it won. I think it was nominated for Oscars and stuff like that. But it was I think much better received than a lot of his other films before this. So I think that has maintained. I think for a lot of people, I saw like a lot of people name it as one of their favorites. So I think it has always been up there as one of Hitchcock's most well respected films. But I think it's not necessarily. It's not. It's always. It seems like more seen as like maybe I would say second tier, but it's not where people put like Vertigo and things like that. It doesn't seem to be ranked that high. But at the time, it was certainly like, oh, this is. I try to think of how to who were they related to because you think Hitchcock before this, even though he's so respected now, like he was seen as like the thriller guy, like like he was almost schlocky in a way. But
Mhm.
this, taking actors that, like you mentioned, Cary Grant and Ingrid, like two of the most respected actors at the time, having a romance, which for whatever reason was seen as more astute and more of a true art compared to like something that was more schlocky or something that was more like something like the 39 Steps.
Mhm.
So yeah, because of that change, I do think obviously as we'll get to it, like it's not like he stayed here. He did a lot of different types of films, and I think he was ahead of the game. And but he would also I think maybe just like sometimes just want to do this movie like this. That's more. I think probably the love triangle got him, and like you mentioned that the mother father relationship, and how it played into the love triangle as well. So I just the reading I have done in Hitchcock and stuff like that makes me think that's why that because he was a co-writer of the script. He didn't write the script himself, but I'm guessing that's what attracted him to the story.
And since we just covered box office in a recent episode, I'll point it out. This came in number 7 the year it was released in 1946. It made uh, $4.8 million. So that's enough for number 7 back in 1946. Though number 1 that year was a movie called The Best Years of Our Lives, which made 10.1 million. So that's where we were at back in 1946.
And with inflation, that's $8 trillion, probably. I don't know.
Basically. And this was, I think, I don't know where this. I didn't do enough research to find out like number wise where this kind of came as far as his US releases. I don't know if this was early on in those. I know 39 Steps was still one of his um British releases. That was 1935, and this is, coming 10 years, 11 years later. So I'm not sure if this was one of the first um strictly US films or if it was within the first, batch, but you're right, it was still early on before he really kind of became what we know him as now.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, he did other like Rebecca before this, and Lifeboat, and so he this it wasn't his first, but he did a few like American films before this.
gotcha. Do you think you have some things that are going to be vying, excuse me, for some awards later on if we do our Hitchcock awards from performances or from just anything in general?
I definitely think obviously we've only two films in here, but I think you do even though we like the previous film, I do think performance wise we got a huge upgrade. Like it's like oh okay it does have some of that like old school like overacting if you don't want to call it that, but also there were those smaller moments as well too that were there. So yeah, performance wise definitely. So
Yeah.
I think that's also if we do think anything regarding uh you know uh relationships or anything like that, certainly up there too.
And this may be like a good like for someone that's completely um kind of like if Alfred Hitchcock is a complete blind spot for you and you haven't viewed, seen any of his films, or if you've only seen one or two, like kind of like me going into this one, I feel like this one might be a good starting spot. Like, I'm not saying
Yeah.
39 Steps wasn't a good starting spot, and I enjoyed that we did that one, but this one might be a you know more akin to what you're going to see coming forward. So I don't know. It seems like it's a good entry point into like what he's doing in a way.
And it's on
Um,
Tubi for free, so yeah.
There you go. Yeah, you can view it for free on Tubi. So next time we're going to be covering. We're only going 2 years. So this time we jumped 11 years from his last film that we covered. Now we're only going to go 2 years into the future with his next film that we're going to cover called Rope. And what's your experience with Rope, and kind of set the stage for us a little bit?
I've seen a little bit of Rope. I don't think I've ever saw it like straight through. I'm pretty sure like I've caught it like either my parents were watching it growing up or on TV, but I don't think I've ever seen it from start to finish completely. So I know about it. I know people talk about it because it's supposed to be. Uh, this is not based on. I thought it was a play. I know it's supposed to be like one continuous shot or something like that. Something of that nature. So that's my knowledge going into it. Beyond like what the plot is, I don't know or anything like that. So I try to go in blind as much as I can. So we'll see how it is.
Apparently, Rope is his first Technicolor film. So
There you go.
we're getting into new territory here. So I have not seen Rope at all, and I know nothing about it. So I'm looking forward to this one as well. So that's what we're going to cover in episode 207. Anything? I don't know, any final words for Notorious, or anything you'd like to say as we close this one out, Dan?
No, I'm good.
Yeah, I think this is, like you said, I think it's a step up. I think this is like, feels like we're there now. And I'm interested to see where the rest of this journey takes us. So if you have your own thoughts on Notorious that you'd like to share with us, you can go to the Geekcast Radio website and leave some comments on the episode post there. Or probably the best way is you can interact with us through our different social media platforms. So you can tag the show, and that'll be at the Cinema Geeks, or you can get to me at Optimus Solo. Dan, how can people reach out to you?
I'm at Comic Concierge at pretty much all platforms.
There we go. The ones that exist, the ones that are coming and going, and who knows what else is going to happen in this crazy year that we're going to see here in 2025. So tune in next time for another chance to listen to more Cinema Geeks with Dan, myself, and the movie Rope.